Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to Discover WalkMe Workstation, where we'll be talking about one of our newest product offerings designed to change the way that your employees get work done in your organization. I'm Liz Gillum, and I'm a Director of Product Marketing here at WalkMe, and I'll be joined in a few moments by Josh Novell, Director of Digital Learning Solutions at Warner Music Group. And together, we're going to be telling you about WalkMe Workstation. I'll get started by showing you a brief overview, some examples of how it's commonly used, and a couple of the top features in Workstation. And then I'll pass things over to Josh, who's going to show you how he's recently deployed WalkMe Workstation in real life. It's fantastic. I can't wait for you to see it. WalkMe Workstation is a centralized hub that simplifies employee needs like information discovery, employee workflows or processes, communication, and even application usage. What this means is that WalkMe Workstation is a centralized and even personalized console that is sitting directly on top of an employee's desktop. So I don't have to be logged into a specific application or even have a web browser open at all to see critical notifications from my company or access top resources, tools, and information. Now, let me give you a couple of examples of how we see this play out in the real world. The first and most common is we see it utilized by IT organizations as a centralized hub for help and support resources. In this case, think about configuring Workstation to do things like open a support ticket when I might have forgotten which application we use for support at my company to start with. I could give quick links to frequently asked questions that might be hosted in articles or knowledge bases. And I could also give guidance to critical but perhaps infrequent processes that employees must conduct, like ordering a new laptop or a piece of hardware for my home office. Another common example is with an HR team that might configure WalkMe Workstation as a centralized hub for HR and employee engagement resources. In this case, I might give quick guidance and links to things like how do I take time off or update a timesheet once it's already been submitted. Or I could use WalkMe Workstation and its notifications feature to initiate workflows like annual enrollment, where I could send a desktop notification to my entire workforce announcing that annual enrollment has begun and kicking off a process with WalkMe guidance to elect your benefits for the next calendar year. A third example could be a sales organization. In this case, you might centralize resources for a large or disparate workforce across offices or geographic locations, and you could send communication around things like end of quarter quota attainment, which application you're supposed to use for contract signing, or launching guidance for opening a new opportunity. We know that sales organizations have a number of applications and resources available to them, and they might not always remember which tool they're supposed to initiate a process, but they know they need to do the work. Simply open Workstation, search for the process, and it will kick off the right application to do the job. Now, we're not limited to these examples. WalkMe Workstation is used best when it combines all of the above: centralized IT, HR, sales, customer care, and even other resources in one centralized location. Enterprise search allows users to discover company applications and resources through a unified search bar. In this case, users can search for any kind of information that might be found in different apps or different resources without searching in each data repository independently. The user will receive personalized results unique to them that are powered by artificial intelligence. For example, I could search for a basic process like in this screenshot for how do I open a support ticket? Or I could search for a specific document I've been working on, or an article or a knowledge base and a tool like Confluence. Enterprise search is best when you don't know where the information is housed that you're looking for, or you need quick and easy access to something that you know exactly what you're looking for. All of this can be done inside enterprise search while respecting privacy, security, and user privileges, so they only see the information that is allowed for them. Top Resources is a centralized place where employees can access commonly used apps, resources, and tools. It starts with a personalized homepage where employees can see information specific to them, like their upcoming meetings or their most used applications. It also can provide static resources that I was mentioning in our previous examples that are relevant across the entire company. This could be things like key HR information like benefits or time off, IT FAQs, or even onboarding resources for new employees. The next is notifications. These enable organizations to send critical announcements directly to an employee's desktop. I don't have to be logged into Microsoft Teams, I don't have to be looking at Slack, and maybe my email is closed, but I could still see really important information that my organization needs me to see now. This could be key events that impact the entire company, like initiating annual enrollment. They could be company-wide announcements like the launch of WalkMe Realize in the example you're seeing on here. This is a real notification we sent to our organization to help get them pumped up, hyped, and to start promoting the event to you. Or it could also be time-sensitive information. Think about an internal application outage and you need to let the entire workforce know that something might not be accessible for a couple of hours. Desktop notifications are a great tool for that. Of course, there is a do not disturb button available to any employee. So if they're in a critical meeting, speaking with a client, or they don't need to get notifications for an hour or so, they can easily turn that off. And the last is ActionBot. You may be familiar with ActionBot through other areas of the WalkMe DAP platform, but it's also integrated into WalkMe Workstation. ActionBot is a conversational chat interface that allows you to leverage any of the prior features through a chat interface. So let's say I was using enterprise search to search for how do I open a support ticket. I could actually conduct and complete that task inside ActionBot and then use automation to populate the relevant applications with the information I entered. So let's talk about benefits. What could you realistically expect to get out of WalkMe Workstation? The first is obvious: improved employee productivity. Imagine not having to search for all of this information and to have common apps, tools, and resources at your fingertips. The second is reduced expenses. We see increased use of self-service tools, which deflects ticket volume, as well as lower traditional training costs. Improved employee engagement. If I can send desktop notifications directly to an employee and track their engagement with that notification and completion of a workflow it's initiated, I know if my workforce is getting the information they need. And lastly, streamlined change management. Workstation is a great tool to migrate from one tool to the next, changing a process or changing something in your organizational structure. And with that, let me welcome Josh Novell, Director of Digital Learning Solutions at Warner Music Group. Welcome, Josh.
Thanks for having me.
So tell me a little bit about Warner Music Group and your role there.
Yeah, sure. So Warner Music Group itself is not really a name that you might recognize, but once we start talking about who we are, it very quickly comes to mind. So we're kind of a collective of many, many labels and publishers around the world. So the likes of Atlantic Records or Elektra Records, artists like David Bowie and Ed Sheeran and Dua Lipa all sit under our care and control. So it's a really fascinating organization to get to work with. And obviously, like, we grow through M&A primarily. So that means we end up with employees all over the world. So coming up with centralized kind of training offerings, that's where my kind of job comes in. So I'm the Director of Digital Learning Solutions. And it's pretty much looking at everything from our regulatory and our mandatory learning stack, all the way through to like, how do we upskill people on the technology that we have access to? And as you can imagine, that's exactly where WalkMe comes into play here.
That's fantastic. So let's talk about the challenges that brought you to WalkMe in the first place. Can you tell me a little bit about what was going on at Warner that you thought, okay, we need to do something different?
Yeah, sure. So one of the first challenges was I was probably the number one employee for COVID lockdown. So I was the first employee being onboarded during COVID lockdown. Huge personal challenge, and I'm sure it was probably a challenge for the organization as well, figuring out how do we remotely get someone onboarded and inducted into the organization. So as you can imagine, digital learning not really existing before I came on board, to really putting in some basic fundamental pieces like the learning technology stack, kind of bulk libraries, things like that. And we utilize those bulk libraries to really start saying, well, what are the real learning needs coming out of the organization? And time again, we heard simply, I don't know how to use the tools that I have access to, or I don't even know which tools I have access to in the organization. So for us, we wanted to really look at how do we approach that in a radical way? Because the L&D person in me kind of shriveled when I heard that expression coming out at us, because I think we've all seen it. You have product owners doing hour-and-a-half long webinars where a good chunk of it is just spent clicking through random web pages, or it's PDFs with squares all over it showing you how to navigate. And I had no interest at all in hiring a full-time PDF editor on my team. So what I really wanted to do is take a radically new approach to this. And we had kind of these three primary goals here. That firstly, we wanted to think really closely about the employee experience. So what tasks exist in that day-to-day piece of the organization? So it could be like submitting your expenses or finding a policy for something, things like that. Secondly, as with all organization, we want to make sure that our data integrity is at the highest level possible, because we've all been in a situation where Like Liz, maybe for you, someone's created an email address for Biz Gillingham or something like that. And then that's fed through into all your other systems in the organization. It's an absolute mess to try and clean up. So we wanted to make sure there's things like data verification and quality controls happening at kind of point of origin, really. And then lastly, as I mentioned before, we grow through M&A. So that means that there's different ways to look at how successful technologies are across the organization. And it can create a bit of kind of cloud and a bit of mystery about which are actually successful by the group standards. So for us, WalkMe was one of the first bits of technology to go in place that allows us to get consistent analytics across all of our tech stacks. So when we get one product owner from one part of the business speaking to another from a completely separate area, they're actually talking the same language now. They're not simply talking about like whether their platform could do stuff or not. They're talking about real kind of quantifiable ROI for the organization.
These sound like three big buckets, and I know they started to come together in the context of Warner Music Group Assistant. So this is your WalkMe Workstation implementation. You call it WMG Assistant in your organization. Can you tell me what it is? And then what are some of your top use cases for how you're using it?
Yeah, sure thing. So with our kind of journey with WalkMe, we started off with like an MVP in one particular platform that we wanted to measure the success on. But after we started iterating this and putting it over multiple platforms, we realized a real kind of flaw in our thinking really here, where if someone wanted to do something, let's say with finances, they still had to remember where that finance platform was and what the address was and all those sort of stuff. So we kind of wanted to bring it out of the browser. So for us, that's where Workstation was a key piece for us, because it not only connects all of that kind of guidance that we created across our platforms, so someone can just say, I want to do this thing, and they don't even really need to know what the platform's name is. We've also done things like plugging in other integrations as well, such as OneDrive or SharePoint. So we're getting to a place where regardless of whether someone is looking for something professionally that we've produced from a corporate level, whether they're looking for something locally within their label, WalkMe Workstation is the solution for them. And it's kind of that assistant. It demystifies that kind of tech stack approach to the organization, where finance might have their one-stop shop, HR's got their one-stop shop, and we're kind of the shopping assistant in there, hence the kind of assistant name that we went with.
That's fantastic. And so I know once you launched WalkMe Workstation, you've got to get the word out to your employees. And what we're looking at on the right side of the screen, this is part of your employee campaign where you had an email banner advertising the product. And then we're seeing images of WalkMe Workstation directly below. These are two tiny pieces in a much broader campaign. Can you tell me about how you got the word out about Assistant during your launch?
Yeah, so it was really quite huge. So the success of our MVP, and I think we'll touch on that in a little bit, really started to get product owners really hungry to work with us. And I've never experienced anything like it before. We've never had it historically where we're making e-learning courses or anything like that, most definitely. But what we wanted to do is make sure that we were tapping into multiple levels of the organization, not just our kind of tech owners. We wanted to make sure that we were speaking to like our facilities team and our reception team and everyone around the organization, like your DEI or your legal teams and all those sort of pocket areas that you now normally don't really hear from, to make sure that their insight and their guidance is also plugged into this thing. One of the things that also I think really set this apart is we were allowing users themselves to actually feedback. All of that was kind of this scope and this idea that we had. Once we started pushing that out there, it got attention at pretty much every single level of the organization. We had the CEO wanting to really push it out personally himself, because this was a game changer. And also being a music company, we wanted to really do a jazzy kind of intro to this as well. So we produced some really nice assets and some videos as well for the launch.
That's a perfect transition. You mentioned a great video, and I'd love to show that to the group now today. What we're going to see is a video that you created for your employees to introduce the concept of WalkMe Workstation and how they should expect to use with it. Let's take a look. Well, you set the bar high. That was awesome. I know everyone watching now is going to want to go back and create one of these for their own organizations as well. So let's take one step back. You mentioned earlier in this presentation that you started with a pilot group, and I know we're looking at a little bit of the data around that pilot performance. Can you talk to us about how you got started with Workstation, why you did an MVP or a pilot group, and how you chose what group to get started with?
Sure. So for us, we actually started with our kind of global employee base across one platform, and that was our Workday platform. So just generally our HCM platform. And for us, that was a bit of a no-brainer because, as you can imagine, being in talent, we're quite closely linked to our HR and people technology function. So it was one kind of within our own sphere of influence. It didn't feel right to me to go out to, say, our streaming partners and things like that to say, let us do something over you that we're not even willing to do over our own technologies. And yeah, as you mentioned, this is the graph that you're kind of seeing in front of us about where we got to with that minimum viable product to really make sure that it was really showing the benefits of this very radically different approach to upskilling and training within the organization. And what you can see in front of you is the blue line is simply showing the amount of users that were engaging with the platforms, and the green line is the amount of time that an average employee would have to spend throughout a month in that platform. So doing day-to-day tasks like booking annual leave or submitting goals or even finding policies and things like that. I think it's pretty much every product owner's dream that we were able to almost half the amount of time people were spending in it, whilst increasing the amount of people that are actually bothering to use the systems and still having the same amount of tasks being submitted at the end of it. So kind of a win-win-win situation for us, really. It was a perfect storm of showing the benefits of what we're trying to do here.
So I'm sure that teed you up for an even simpler full launch globally. Can you tell us how that's going? I know you're very early in the journey.
Yeah, very, very early in the journey. And actually what you're seeing up on screen here is the first week that we went live. It's significantly better stats now. But I think we mentioned at the top of the presentation, we're about 5,500 employees globally, with pretty much, you look at this map here, that is where our employees are based. So we're getting really, really good even usage all around the world. And also just coming up to 41,000 kind of sessions, which is kind of questions asked and answered within the platform in the first week. That's huge. We're now just over about 2.5 weeks since that, and we're just topping over 120,000 now. So like, it's really, really fantastic to actually see that people are actually using this as part of their day-to-day life. It's making the difference we wanted it to. We're getting great suggestions coming back from our users as well about other things that we didn't identify from a corporate perspective that could be plugged into this in the future. And it's really, really exciting.
That's awesome. So tell us where you're going next. You're just in the beginning. What's next for Warner Music?
Yeah, so a load of work ahead of us. It's kind of, we've set a high bar now, but we definitely think that we'll be able to achieve this. So firstly, we're looking across, expanding across more and more enterprise applications across our organizations. So as you can see here, there's a number of names that I'm sure are very, very familiar with you, as well as some pieces that are kind of our secret tools in-house as well that aren't so secret, because we also talk about them quite publicly. So we're going to be kind of continuing plugging it in. So everything from like, how do I get the maternity policy, all the way through to like, I want to submit an expense or raise a PO, and all those sort of background tasks that people normally dread, we're hoping to really simplify and make frictionless within the organization. We're also planning to expand our kind of plug-in connectability. I think I mentioned earlier on, we're plugging in things like OneDrive and SharePoint. We're also looking to expand this out to systems like Box and Confluence and various other tools that our creative teams will really use to make sure that it's really valuable to every single employee in the organization. And also, being a global place, we want to really, really make sure that this is available to people in local languages. So we've actually just launched the Japanese version, and we've got Chinese and Spanish well in the pipeline, but we're hoping to have this in pretty much every language that we support as an organization, so that it's a really nice experience for them, really.
Josh, I think we could sit here for another 15, 20 minutes and ask you even more questions about this. You've set a high bar for everyone listening today, and I'm really, really excited about where you're going next. Can we check on you again this time next year?
100%. Yeah, definitely.
Well, thank you so much, Josh. And thank you to everyone who's been listening. As we wrap up this session, I want to give you a little bit of an idea of what's next. If you're looking for another session immediately, stay tuned for our demo on the future of work powered by digital adoption. That's going to showcase WalkMe Workstation in the context of our broader digital adoption platform from a product perspective. So sign into that one next. And don't forget to get up again tomorrow, and we are going to kick off with a fireside chat with Sinead Bovell on the future of work and digital adoption. Tune in tomorrow again to see us. With that, thank you so much, Josh. Thank you to everyone listening, and have a great day.